Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. Another impromptu show, as always. Today, we got a super duper interesting individual talking about some really interesting things. We're going to talk about, as you can tell down there, myth busting Spanish influence on the Filipino martial arts and other bladed systems. We're going to talk about a potentially, likely, probably is going to be a historic event. So, without further ado, let's get the dopest Filipino martial arts intro podcast in all of history, and then we'll get started.
Get the fuck out of bed, bitch. Go.
You're finished!
Get up. Get up. Gotta wake up, bitch. Get up.
Oh,
Get up. Get up.
For it, let's launch the counterattack.
awesome. All right, a little bit of a build up, right? People message me all the time. Hey, I got this idea, or there's this event happening, and I'd like to get your thoughts on it. And usually I'm like, okay. I'm always happy to help. But I really don't get my hopes and expectations up. And the same happened with my next guest. But then as he kept talking about this event, I was like, holy crap, this is actually something like important. And so I've committed to helping in any way I can. And part of that is this beautiful community that we've all built together. So if I can just borrow your eyes and ears for a moment, I promise this is going to be worth it. So without further ado, here's my guest, Mahipal. How are you, brother?
Hey, Paulo, doing well. Hey, thank you for having me here today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So let's get things right off the bat, right? Like, you have not been a very public figure by design.
Yes.
And now you're sort of stepping into this role, I suppose. But who are you for those who don't know you? And what have you done? What have you done? What'd you do?
Oh, wow. Just a lifelong student of the martial arts and started martial arts because I was a scrawny little Indian kid who got my ass kicked more than I can remember. And my dad got fed up of trying to come and pull me out. And he's like, okay, you need to start doing something. My dad was a champion wrestler. He was a silver medalist in the Asian Games and, very serious wrestler. So I tried to do wrestling with him, but I was a little asthmatic kid with big glasses. So let's just say it didn't work out well. Right? So then joined a local Y, started karate, did a whole bunch of things, and I've been doing martial arts for most of my life. So that's a little about me. I think more interesting. It's not about about me, but the work that we get done. That's always been my focus. But in terms of the systems I've studied, it's Indian martial arts, Japanese martial arts, a range of Southeast Asian martial arts,
Yeah.
Americana, classic Americana, and then of late also the European arts. So the way I see myself is just really a student of the martial arts who just has a bunch of questions and like a decent nerd, keep pursuing those questions in the hope of finding answers.
This is what fascinated me about you. By the way, if you can speak up a little bit louder or move yourself closer to the mic, that would be awesome. Right? Like I've traveled the world, and I meet a lot of people who are like, "Oh, I am a lifelong martial artist." And sometimes it's impressive, sometimes it's not. But you've put in the work. You've traveled the world, and you've sought out these obscure or less represented arts, and you really dug deep, not just with this sort of hobbyist, casual energy, but from an academic perspective, right? Like very detailed and meticulously gathering lost or forgotten information about the bladed arts and other martial arts.
Correct. And it's not just me, I've been very blessed to have a few really smart people, some really gifted people, guys like Professor TJ Obi from New York, Professor Michael Ryan, Professor Mika, Professor Yuhavori. I mean, these guys are all guys who have 30 plus years in the martial arts
Right.
and are academics, are professors, historians, ethnographers. In addition to that, the teachers that I have personally been drawn to, we all are drawn to a particular kind of a teacher, the
Yes.
teacher that may work for me may not work for you, and likewise, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
The ones that I've been drawn to are guys who've actually dug deep into history. They've tried to retrieve things. They've tried to preserve things. So it's a paradox of guys on the bleeding edge of innovation, but that
Yeah.
innovation is rooted in the age-old methods of what worked. And it may seem like, oh, that doesn't make sense, but it actually makes sense. When is the last time you and I have actually had to go take someone's head off? So we can play and theorize and sort of pressure test it, but
Right.
there's one thing about pressure testing, and then there's what I call head testing, where you've actually taken a head off.
Right.
So that's a well of knowledge, a wealth of knowledge that can be drawn upon, and then our new findings, our interconnected world allows us to see other things, understand things such as neurosciences. That's also a very deep background for me. In fact, I've published about 240 podcasts on neurosciences and how the brain changes things and its effect on the martial arts. So it's this merger of these two things and just nerding
Yeah.
out that got me to open some doors that most people don't have access to.
Yeah, and when you first told me that, I was like, "Oh yeah," but the more we talked, I'm like, well, "You really did open up some doors that legitimately most people don't have access to." Now, the question I want to ask is, when you approach these studies, because I know when Filipino martial artists who are Filipinos do research, they carry a bias and
Yes.
they're very protective rather than being objective when it comes to findings. You study Filipino martial arts. Do you find yourself being in the same position where you're almost researching, with a goal or focus to validate claims, or have you don't care? Truth is truth kind of thing.
Truth is truth. And I think it might just be that I've always been an outsider. And what I mean by that is, I was born in India, raised in Europe and Africa, and then living in the US. So I see the world as my home and, all these people as my people. And yet I'm not bound to any one culture. Maybe that's a plus point or a minus point, depending on how you see it. At the end of the
Plus
day,
point.
you know, at the end of the day, biases get you killed, man. Because then
Sure.
I call biases belief systems, and what's the acronym for belief systems? BS. So you know,
Wow.
so what the BSs do is actually blinds us. It blinds
Right.
us to certain things, right?
Yeah.
And anytime you're blinded, you're dead. You're dead. So it's in your best interest to open this up, and it's a hard pill to swallow, because many a times what we find is that one of two things, that me and my school is inadequate, or the system itself is inadequate. And then the question becomes, what do I do with that? And it depends on the kind of question you ask, right? Because if I'm just doing this for my health, it's one thing. If I'm doing it for self-defense, it's another thing. If I'm doing it
Right.
for that ambush, it's a whole different story, right? So the question that you ask is going to have its inherent biases.
Yeah, 100%. And that was part of my difficulty. I still consider myself rather new in the Filipino martial arts, but I did approach it with some degree of genuine curiosity and wanting the best for it. And I found that in doing that, I've had to be critical and skeptical. And that's not often well received in a community that is based on, family and fortifying. And sometimes when you seek truth, you're kind of seen as somebody who tears down rather than build up.
Yes, I understand that. And I think it's what I have found is that it's how we approach the truth, right? I think as long as we do it with genuine curiosity and fascination, and treat it not as something like, hey, you got to prove to me that you're right. I don't
Right.
go that way, right? I have a hypothesis within me, and I say, this is what I'm trying to disprove. And like a scientist, I go at it, and I'm open to being surprised, open to being fascinated. So I think that's the way I approach it. I never show up at anyone's well, let's just say I've had my ass kicked by some of the best in the world.
Right.
So I don't show up with a sense of arrogance and saying, okay, you know what, show me what you got. No, it's much more like, may I see this, and may I validate what I think may work
Right.
or not work. So
I
that's how
can
I approach it.
I can relate. I too have gotten my ass kicked. And it's funny, right? Because when you have access to a certain level of people over time, you sort of welcome, and it's
Yes,
strange. Like I welcome getting my ass kicked.
correct.
There's so much to be learned from that exchange in energy.
Yes, like something my dad and my grandpa taught me early on, and it's a very Rajput thing. I'm from a clan called the Rajputs in the Northwest Indian frontier, and we've kind of been at war for thousands of years. So one of the things that we were taught early on is the definition of success. What is success? Success is to be progressively beaten by better and better opponents.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that quote. So there's a lot to talk about today.
Yeah,
Let's begin. Let's capture their attention a little bit. When you talk about myth busting, because I asked you, what should we call this podcast? And you're like, we talk about the Spanish influence in the Filipino martial arts, and that's what I had initially wanted to call it. And you're like, hold on, wait, let's go broader. The Spanish influence on other bladed systems. Let's begin with the Filipino martial arts. Can you specify a myth that is pervasive, that a lot of people believe in, that may not be true, or according to your research isn't true?
yeah. The fact that one of the things that I hear all the time, especially from people who've not really dug in deep, is that, oh, the Spanish completely transformed and changed the martial arts in the Philippines, and the roots of most Filipino martial arts is Spanish, right? Now, again, these are questions that I'm still exploring, and I can give you the answers that I have at this moment, right? And part of the work that we are doing is also to go further in and say, okay, is this true, or is there more finer details to it?
So the myth we're trying to bust, is that the Spanish influence completely transformed, or were the foundations of Filipino martial arts.
Correct. So
You're
that's
saying
a
that's a
popular
that's a myth.
that's a popular myth, right? That's a very
Okay.
popular myth that, okay, that's what it is. But I think it does such a disservice to the Filipinos, because what you're really saying is that prior to the Spanish, pre-Hispanic, that there were no indigenous fighting arts. Number one, right? Number two, I mean, when depending on whose history book you read, they arrived in the Philippines and portions of the Philippines in the mid 1500s, and they were there till the end of the 1800s, right? Yes, a long period. But what is longer than that? They've had trading routes with China going for over 1,000 years. They traveled to Indonesia, the influence of their indigenous arts on this. And then why do we always forget India? The Chola Empire ruled over all the islands from Malaysia down to Borneo from the 8th century to the 13th century, right? So, and you look at the weapons such as the kris, look at the balila, look at some of the barong, the sangot, which is the sickle. You find those designs all over the Malabar region in India. And the designs of the kris go back to 2nd century BC in India. And you find this on all the old temple statues. So what I'm saying is, and then what I'm saying is that it's not just Spanish, because people have always fought. Now, when you're living on an island, your resources are limited. You're not going to be like, okay, anybody come in and take what you want, right? You have to fight for it, and it's a hard life, especially when you're a migratory culture. So we are basically attesting that there is more than Hispanic influence. Yes, there is a Hispanic influence. Of course, there are so many mestizos, so many Christianity took over the religion. Spanish became the de facto language for a long time.
Mhm.
So yes, it shaped things. Now we have to look at influence in two ways, right? Influence is not just hey, I'm giving you ideas, I'm discussing ideas with you, and that may influence you. But if you counteract my ideas, if you push back against these ideas, it is still influencing you because it's shaping you in a particular way, and it's also
Yep.
shaping me, right? So
Right.
influence is two-way. It's a two-way street. So that's a critical aspect that I want to look at. Now also look at one other thing that you always hear. I love the FMA. I mean, I've spent so much time with it. Look me up. You'll see I've done a fair bit of FMA. But it's always being connected to the high arts of destreza, and I call it a high art, right? And nothing wrong with it. But think about this: if you are a conqueror and you've conquered multiple islands with a few people, are you going to show them your most prized arts?
Probably not.
Yeah, think about that. You are not going to show them your most prized arts. But the way that, but we are always seeking, fighters are always seeking for that. Let's just call it a branding, right? A differentiation to say, okay, you know what? This is important. I'm going to say that my arts came from here or my arts came from there. And I think, especially all over Asia, there's this whole thing that we see. And I'm an Asian, so I laugh at it when I say this. That this is my secret family art. And it came because of our interactions with this culture or that culture. That foreign, this looking to foreign for validation to feel more important
Mhm.
has somehow been hammered into the Asian consciousness. Not just Filipinos, Indians too.
For sure.
For the longest time. So that's a myth that we need to bust, because I think it keeps us prisoner. It doesn't allow us to explore the ferocity and the beauty of the arts that come from our own homes.
Is there like a pragmatic cutoff where we say that's too far back? Then it's one art. Like, do we get to a point where it's like, well, we're one people, we're all derived from the same
But
ancestry, and we've been
but
fighting for that long?
I don't think that's true for anywhere in Asia, right? Because even this whole idea about one nation is pretty recent within the
Yeah.
Philippines, with the nationalization of the language, with Arnis trying to come out as sport and being used as a way to unify the people, right? But most people, I mean, just go one generation back, right? If you look at Stockton, so we're working on a book on Stockton, Professor Michael J. Ryan and me, to find out the true history of Eskrima coming to the US, right? Even there, these Filipinos have come to America, but they're still very clannish, very tribal. Oh, I'm Ilocano, I'm Visay, I'm Cebuano, I'm from here, I'm from there. And the
Mhm.
cliques are so tight, even overseas, right? And you find this with most cultures who migrate first. It takes a little time to assimilate, right? So I think that tribalism is very inherent in most fighting arts, not just the Philippines, but around the world. Because what that tribalism does is it keeps what worked for that particular group of people
Mhm.
in that place. Because if that is exposed, then you lose the element of surprise.
There's an implication there that in just examining Stockton Filipino martial arts, given the tribalism and different exposures to this new land, that there was a cross and sorry, and that influence works both ways. That the current iterations of Filipino martial arts we have right now, even though we can say it was derived from Stockton, could have a different flavors because it started with a different base and different ingredients were added to it.
Yes, and it's still evolving, right? Because
Mhm.
now in today's day and age, we have most people who are exposed to a plethora of things, whether it's through YouTube or going through seminars or actually
Mhm.
working out with people. So when you see things and you truly say, "Oh, I really like that. I really want to do this," and you start bringing that in, it changes your art. It cannot not change your art.
So to what degree do you think, if you can be so bold as to put a percentage or a label to it, To what degree, and if we can call it original Filipino martial arts, and we're saying that under the context of the Filipino migrants who came to the United States versus what it is today, considering this two-way street of influence, how different do you suppose Filipino American martial arts is to what was initially brought in? Is it
Very
completely
different.
it's very
Very
different.
Yeah. So I'll just give one example, right? Because I
Okay.
really want, at some point, I want Professor Michael Ryan here with me because we've kind of collaborated. Just to give you an idea of how deep this research was, we've done over 70 interviews. And when I say 70 interviews, in depth, anywhere from 1 to 3 hours, right? We've examined old tapes that nobody has had. We've read hundreds of books. We've read every issue of FMA Digest, everything published on any of these guys, and gone through line by line. So
Wait,
that's
hold
how
on.
deep.
And you're taking notes, and I
Yeah.
picture like this FBI wall chart of
Yeah,
tracking like a serial
so
killer.
basically, like a serial killer, how you would track, we're tracking the roots down, and we've actually
Wow.
managed to track things down all the way to the late 1800s. But that's a different story. Okay, so we'll come
Damn.
to that at a different
Okay.
time. But let me tell you just one example of why things have changed.
Okay.
Now, how did the old guys train? They didn't have dojos or schools. They just
Mhm.
fought, and people got hurt. Right? If you didn't block, you got hurt, and you couldn't go crying to anybody else. But today, what is the primary predominant thing, an implied contract when you go to study? Oh, it is safe. Now,
Mhm.
when you put that safety in, it makes you do things that you would not otherwise do,
Sure.
right? And even that one single thing has completely changed the arts. Number one. Number two, moving from a blade orientation, which many of them had early on, to moving to a stick orientation. It changes things. A lot of guys move with sticks and say, I'm moving with a blade. But you just have to watch where the knuckles are pointed, and these guys have never held a blade because they hold it this way, right? So it's these little things you may think that doesn't make too much of a difference, but the idea of not getting sued, the idea of, hey, I want you to keep coming to me in order for me to work you through 10 degrees, let's just say that, right? To
Right.
work you through 10 degrees for the next 20 years changes the way you teach martial arts. But now think about the old timers. Did they have 20 years before they could get ready for a fight? No. Most of them had a few weeks to a few months of training, and then they were told either go to war, like Grandmaster Leo Hiron, or with Angel Caballas, he was out protecting people on the docks in a few weeks to a month. So that mentality changes things. And Paulo, I've seen some of your videos. Like when you work, you work with blades, whatnot. We spar, we do friendly sparring. It's one thing. Now bring an electrical blade, something that gives you a shock. Suddenly the guy is a little more jumpy, right? Or better still, yeah, the guys get a little more jumpy.
A
Now
little
pull
bit.
out pull out a live blade
Yeah,
and
it's a
don't have
different.
masks and don't have anything, and see how
Right.
you train, right? So that orientation changes things. Number one. Number two, the geography.
Yeah.
Where did these guys learn and fight? They learned on beaches, they learned in the backyards and small alleys,
Mhm.
right? No fancy footwear, no uniform. Now, how do you think they moved there, as opposed to a nice air-conditioned home or a nice school, right? So the geography changes things, the safety orientation changes things, and then why are you approaching? I mean, why are you doing it? Because I want to learn the 64 dams in Avali. Do you think that's what Angel Caballas would have said? No, you'd have said, what are those 2, 3 things that I can do
Right.
that can end a fight quickly?
Yeah. So, okay. Digesting all of that, let's imagine for a second this art form of tightrope walking across two cliff faces.
Yes.
Let's assume that the old way was just, hey, there's a piece of rope here. We're going to walk across.
Mm-hmm.
And then drawing from that context, we're in modern times,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now we have harnesses that attach
Mm-hmm.
ourselves to the rope. We have safety
Mm-hmm.
nets underneath.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't logic dictate that we will, because there is no fear of death and the act more or less remains the same, that we're actually in a period of a more rapid progression and evolution. So
What it
fear of death is it's
Agreed.
it's
I
it's
hear you.
important, but it's also a
I hear you.
barrier to
I hear
right.
you.
Okay.
So this is a leisure that we have. We
Yeah.
are blessed, and it's a leisure that we have.
Yes, sir.
But our ancestors didn't have that. Number one, and number two, the things that you do without fear, you are bound to make stupid mistakes. But when there is a fear of real serious repercussions, the decisions you make and the quality of the decisions you make are very different. Now, I'm not saying that our modern way is not good. In fact, I wouldn't be able to do 90% of the things I do without without the modern technology, right? Even you and me talking here in two different countries and discussing this, it's only possible today. It wouldn't have been possible even 25, 30 years ago,
Mhm.
right? So yes, it is great, but let's be aware that these are two very different forms. One is a form of leisure, and I'm able to indulge in it, whether it's for my curiosity, whether it's for my intellectual development, or just to be
Mhm.
cool, right?
It's cool. It's
Yeah,
very
it's cool. Yeah, or just to do that. But that's not what our ancestors did, right? It was not about that. It was about, hey, I need to protect my women. I need to protect my home. I need to protect the food that I have, right?
yes.
So,
Yes.
so it's a very different way that you would approach. Today, I have the luxury of trying to mix five different arts to say, okay, what can emerge from it? Back then, it's like I don't have the time because I have to go work. I have to feed my family,
Yeah.
and the things that I'm working on, it bloody well work. That's the difference.
Yes. Yes. I don't want to stray, or I don't want to stay too much into this
Sure.
to with regards to how much um fear and circumstance affects the nature of training. Like that's a given. Obviously there's a correlation there. So what is then the value or the purpose of getting so detailed with the old ways instead of where the old way may have been, hey, let's focus on these one or two things, and we don't have a lot of time to even train these one, two, three things. What purpose is there
Mhm.
in trying to extract detail from something that
It's
mean
over. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I get it. I get that question all the time,
yeah,
right? Two things. One is a personal passion, right? I just enjoy doing it, so I do it. I mean, one of the first conversations you and I had is you asked me, why am I doing this? I said, I like it. And that's what drives it, right? Number one. Number two, I see the old ways as massive libraries. These are
okay,
massive libraries of information.
yeah,
And and the value of a library is in me being able to reach it and read it and say, wow, that's pretty cool. These are entirely different worlds.
right,
So being able to enter that and extract the knowledge from it is amazing. Now, when we forget who we are or where we come from, our life is a little empty. So being able to go back and say, okay, this is where we were, and look how far we've come. That feeling of accomplishment, for whether it's our genetics or our intellectual curiosity,
mm-hmm.
is really cool. Third, those who don't study history are bound to repeat it. So it means that you know, I'm, things may go bad, the world may go crazy, and then do I want to figure out this stuff the hard way? Right. So it's a curiosity, it's a sense of our history and our shared stories, and the fact that, hey, I want this to be alive so that it doesn't disappear forever. And then some dude somewhere 500 years from now is trying to rebuild it, but he only knows how to use lightsabers or lasers, and he's thinking, okay, I think this is
Right.
what they did, you know. So that's what it is. You know?
Do you feel like you're some sort of, or the people that you're with and the people who share your passion, is there some sense of urgency to the work you're doing? Because it seems like the thread that connects our time with their time is very thin, and there aren't
Correct.
enough threads
Correct.
woven together and working together and gathering this information.
Yeah, I do feel a sense of urgency because, let's look at HEMA, right? HEMA, historical European arts. Yep, these guys are so passionate and they're trying to revive things from the text from the 1500s to the 1900s, so to speak. right?
Mhm.
And I see how hard it is for them. And this is not so far back in history. And what comes in is your biases based on, hey, I've studied ninjutsu or I've studied Filipino arts, and now suddenly I'm seeing either a European or a African martial artist trying to move to that. I'm like, no, that's not the root of it, right? So, but now with all these mixtures happening and people trying to, look at the small sport and say, I want a little of this, a little of that, and everyone wants their own style. I think
Yeah.
some of these old ways are fast disappearing, right? And I think in my lifetime, I'm probably going to see more than half the arts that I passionately love just disappear. So what
Right.
I'm trying to do is trying to work with these people, archive their art, so that if
Mhm.
sometime in the future, somebody says, "Oh, I want to rework this or learn that,"
Right.
it's not based on myths and stories or that, if you've played the game telephone, by the time the story goes to 10
Yeah.
people, it's completely changed, right? But now they will have these films, which are all shot in 4K and a comparison of it from their own mouths, right?
By the
Because
way,
when you look, go ahead.
I when you told me about the work that you've gathered and you're collected, you're talking about traveling the world, filming in 4K from these unknown or obscure masters. You're gathering up manuscripts and articles and categorizing them. You're dealing with, you know, academia and finding ways to really curate this vast library of knowledge. There's a part of me that thinks there may be others like you.
Yes, I'm sure there are.
And the thing about this is that when you have something special, when you have exclusive access to something, it seems that the tendency is to want to hold
Hoard it.
on to that and to
Yes.
not share it and to not spread it. And if there are people like you right now who may be undergoing this same transformation that you're going through, where it's time to share this, it's time to weave these loose threads together so we can have a real connection to our past.
Yes.
What's your message to them?
Come out and do it. And I understand the reluctance, right? So for example, there are at least three people that I've worked with very deeply, and I'm talking about over 100 hours of film with each one of them, that don't want the films released while they're alive. And there's a good reason for it,
Yeah.
because statute of limitations doesn't go away on certain things.
Right.
Okay. So I understand that, but so they have taken a risk in coming out and putting this on film. So some of that won't come out, but one of the other things, outlets for this is starting to write about it. I have, like I said, Professor Michael Ryan's working on this. He's doing the hard job of putting all this in writing, connecting all these things up. Uh, that's one piece. The second piece is doing symposiums like we do, where bring them forward and say, I know you guys don't teach commercially. I know you guys don't like
Mm.
running schools, but come here, look at the history. Let's look at the connection so that this stuff is preserved, so that people out there know that, yes, this is real. It's not some made up bullshit where, oh, Mahipal has access to this super secret master that nobody else has seen, or, it's in his family lineage. It's busting that kind of stuff, because what that does is it actually destroys the search for true stuff. So the other people who are there doing stuff like me, come on out, come on out. Let's work together. I'm figuring things out in terms of how this can be saved, how this can be replicated, because I'm trying to work with universities, trying to work with museums, replicate all this stuff in multiple places, so that even if one of the places, God forbid, something happens and goes down, there are other copies of the stuff that exists everywhere else. And my personal goal is that I'm committing to is that the stuff that I collect and record and whatnot, it'll be saved for 100 years.
Yeah, I think that's great. This prevention of erosion of knowledge and information that we're barely able to hold on to it now, and so I think this is why once you told me about it, I was like, yeah, I'm really not asking for anything in return other than there is a part of me that wants to be a part of this to help it.
Come on. And like I told you that day, this is too big for one man, and I'm not trying to hold on to this. My real hope is, like I told you that day, if I can light that passion, that fire 5 to 6 people in my lifetime that go off and start doing things in their own way and collective,
Yeah.
right? And that's a well-lived life. I would consider myself extremely successful.
That's awesome. If anyone's listening and this is resonating with you, uh, get a hold of this man. The work is absolutely incredible. Now, there's this event, and when you
Yeah.
told me about the event, I was like, no, there's no way you can pull this off. There is just there is no way. This sounds like some. First of all, I do believe it to be historical. It's what you're trying to accomplish here. If you can manage to pull it off, is absolutely historical. I'd like to share, if that's okay. I'm gonna present with you guys this website. Can you tell us a little bit about it as I bring it up here?
Sure. So we set this website up basically to talk about this lab. Now, in the past, I've done 3 other labs. The first one was Legacy of the Blade, which was all about the blade arts of the world. Next was the stick arts of the world. The third one was the arts of the Southeast Asian archipelago. And now we're looking at, okay, the Spanish was the first global kingdom, right? So they conquered the world. They conquered the world, the known world, 5 continents, and they did it at the, you know, I like to say at the edge of the steel, right? And they fought, they conquered many places, they lost in many places. So there was an active influence of their fighting with fighting arts from around the world. So what we are doing is bringing all the places that they touched together in one place, one time to say, okay, now let's see what these arts are like. If you leave this on, I can just talk about it a little bit, right?
Mhm.
Let's see how it changed things. So we have 3 different schools of destreza people coming, right? The Radha school, right? And the Kranza school, and then also Bulgar. This was the street fighting version of destreza. So we have those 3.
Never
4.
even heard of that. Sorry, go on, go on. The
Yeah,
street fighting version of Destreza. I want to learn
yeah,
that.
well, yeah. I mean that's my characterization of it, right? That was
Okay.
the street art, right? Next, it has about 28 to 30 techniques, and those are things that I've worked over and over again, and it's been captured. Look at the work of Tim Riviera or Pomperesi. Those are 2 guys who've not just written about it, but they actually are able to do all of it, right? So that's one. So then, who did they fight with the most? It was the Moors and the Africans, the Northern African arts. And especially when we look at the raiding parties that went in, took over Andalusia, then got kicked out of it, what were their fighting methods? How did their curved blades, the nimcha work? How did they use the staff? How did their raiding parties go to work? So those are things that a guy by the name from your neck of the woods, Adam Myrie, is going to come and he's going to share that with us. Now, going on to the New World, before we go into the New World, going into the Philippines, we see 2 major influences. One is islands that were captured, and then we see the emergence of what I call asymmetrical weapons. 2 different length weapons or 2 completely different classes of weapons working together. So we have the Cañate families, one of the senior most teachers, Grandmaster Ron Lu, who's going to show Latigo y Daga, how the shot whip and the daga work together, how you trap, how you capture, and then the kill shots go in. Then you have the island of Mindanao, right? The Moros, and it's an island that was never captured, never taken control of. And these are some of the most mysterious arts, in my opinion, because the Tausubs and the Moros don't really share these arts with too many people. I've been lucky. I've been studying it for 3 years on a weekly basis, right? And the use of the kampilan, how the spear was used, what are the battle strategies used by these guys in order to keep not just the Spaniards at bay, but they even kept the Americans at bay. Americans never really were able to capture it with all our firepower, even into the 20th century, right? So there's a deep fighting culture and spirit that's there. So looking at some of the principles of what their fighting is, these arts are never really shown outside, And to my knowledge, in the West, there are 3 people who do it, right? And none of them teach publicly. Okay. And the person that I'm learning from, some of the other teachers have come to check him out because they're like, oh, you say you teach this, let me see it. And then they've all walked away, So I walked away because okay, he's doing what he's doing. Because you don't want to say you do moral arts, because you do that and you can't back it up, you're in trouble, man. That's all I'm saying. Okay. Then coming on to the New World, they conquered all of the Americas. Now we're looking at specifically the arts of the machete, double machete, as it developed in the jungles of Colombia and Panama. So the only person who's become a full instructor in it and with multiple lineages, and he's an actual professor. He's kind of like traveled all over the Americas and Africa looking for old arts. Is Professor T.J. Obi. He's going to be showing. He doesn't teach. He doesn't teach openly. Okay, this is the only place he's coming to teach. He's going to be showing how the arts of Grima are going to work and how they work. And he and I have been in discussions on actually leading an expedition down to the jungles of Colombia, and then work with those few remaining people and give them blades and take blades and jump in and figure out what works, right? So that's there. Then moving up north, we're looking at the vast expanse of the American Southwest and how the Spaniards completely transformed the New Mexican army, how the Don started to use the long bullwhip. So this same classical Americana, so the long bullwhip that is from the southwest of the Americas. So we're going to explore that, how it's used as a weapon, how even though it's a long bullwhip, how you can move between multiple ranges, and some of the new learnings, as Guru Inasanta says, that awake again, how these are awakening again because people have dedicated their entire lifetimes to studying these art forms. So Anthony DeLongis is going to show that. Then looking at the southeast of the U.S., right? The bayous of Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, a very, very particular kind of fighting developed, which is the Bowie knife, right?
The Bowie knife, yeah.
Yes, because why it's so beautiful is because, at one point you had the French, the Spanish, and the Italian schools all in New Orleans. And dueling was a day-to-day affair. Like many hundreds and hundreds of people have died. I was talking to Paul Kirshner, one of the most impressive researchers in the Bowie blade area from an academic standpoint. And he basically said, man, I've moved beyond this. And he unloaded 2 gigabytes of research of every newspaper article on the Bowie knife from the early 1800s to the mid 1900s on me, and said, okay, go have a field day. And you hear all kinds of crazy stories, mothers taking a Bowie knife and chopping off a man's head, and senators pulling out a Bowie knife in Congress. And think about this. America loves weapons, yeah? They've never banned a damn gun. They banned the Bowie knife. What does that tell you? Right? Just think about it.
Man.
So the Bowie knife, this was an art form that was revived again by James Keating and Bill Bagwell, who traveled and collected all the techniques and put it back in a structure in a way it can be packaged and taught. So for the first time, I'm stepping forward to teaching it, and studied with Uncle Jim for many, many years, along with one of my brothers in arms, Dexter Mitch. We're going to work on the Bowie knife and, what the cuts are, what true timing is, how distance was measured, how the back cuts happen, and then what happens when double cuts and double deaths were very common, right? And how they dealt with that.
Right. Okay. Real quick, just a quick divergence there. When we talk about influence going both ways, is any part of this involved the indigenous Native American
That's who they fought with. That's who they fought with.
That's
right?
what I'm saying, right? So there must have been.
So there was, and then you have the development of the Mexican Bowie as well, which is its own animal. So anytime you fight somebody, you get a certain degree of refinement, and your enemy shapes you, right? Because you get used to dealing with a certain kind of an attack or a certain perspective, and that's what you're dealing with.
Absolutely.
So yes, you are influenced by it.
So Mahipal, here's a quick question, right? Like already, there's going to be a natural skepticism to this, right? Tim Rivera, in conversation with Calisa Americano, states, and it's on the screen, I just want to stress the importance of focusing on evidence over speculation.
Correct.
Which is a big problem in this subject. So can you give us a little bit of a word about how you manage, because some elements of this is going to be speculative,
of course.
there is evidence. And can you talk to us about how you, I mean, maybe he missed it,
Yes,
how you gather evidence and how you draw conclusions and what is this all about, right? Like, how are you going to convince the skeptics that have
I am
been
not.
arguing this forever?
I don't think I can convince anyone, especially when people have their BS belief systems in place and they're not willing to look at evidence. What we are doing is laying a hypothesis out and then beginning to say, okay, this is the question, now let's examine. And I agree with Tim. We need to follow evidence. And how are you going to find evidence? You're either going to find it in written records, or two, you're going to find it because you're beginning to see similar movements. And those movements are very, very specific, right? And then you start to say, okay, immigration did happen. These people did clash in this period of time.
Right.
Though there's no written record, we're seeing these similarity of movements. So you can say with a certain degree of confidence, not 100%.
Of course.
I'm not in, I cannot say 100% of confidence with anything, even my own damn art, right? I can't,
Of course.
right? So we can say this is what the truth leads us to. And I like to say this, all the time that somebody asked me, I think it was might have been Dean, I don't remember who, asked me, is like, what would you classify as a success at this event, right?
Mhm.
And I said that at the end of the event, we leave with better questions.
I like that. I like
Right?
that. No, it's really important. You're not trying to get rid of skepticism. It seems like you welcome it, and it seems like what you're doing is you're trying to piece together almost like a crime scene where some evidence has been, purposefully or by circumstance been removed, and you're just putting the pieces together to come up with some hypothesis that is based on the trails and the artifacts and what was left behind.
Yeah, and like my favorite answer is I don't know, and therefore I need to find out,
Right.
and that's what I'm looking to do. So I agree with Tim, and that's why I respect him and his work quite a bit. And the big thing is, you're going to find truth in two ways, right? And I have three ways, but okay, let's talk about even the third. The first is you're looking at historical records. Okay, that's pretty well understood. Second is you jump in and you actually play with this different stuff. Like,
Right.
a lot of the FMA guys say, oh, yeah, yeah, this Spanish connection, this, that. How many of them have actually studied a Spanish art?
Mhm.
Exactly. Exactly. So you have not looked at, you're saying this is a deep connection, but you haven't gone in and looked at and studied, maybe even taken a few seminars or looked some at the source material to say, okay, is this real or am I just spitting out shit I've heard, right? Pardon my French, but that's how I feel about it, right? And then the third is what I call informed informed intuition, because when you're soaking in this information at this rate from multiple sources,
Mhm.
you start getting certain insights that you may not be able to explain, but those become the threads that you follow. And that's what this is about. This is about starting to bring these people on the same smorgasbord, saying these are our ideas, this is what we are seeing. You may walk away with saying, hey, this art and that art don't seem to have anything to do with the Spanish systems, and an art we thought we never knew about may have complete knowledge of it. So this is the beginning of that exploration. Do I think this will be complete at the end of the symposium? No, this is just the first step, the beginning. Hopefully, in my lifetime, we have a few good answers, and then the next generation will have even better answers.
Okay, let's talk about this event.
Yeah.
Okay. When I first saw this, I was like, who are these people? I know one or two of them. So explain to me why somebody who might be interested and don't know these people, like, we live in this proof, almost exposure influence driven world. I've never heard of a lot of these people. Talk to me about the value that they might present, generally speaking, right? Because
So
now we're like, okay, well, if you're good, how come you don't have 100,000 Instagram followers?
yeah, no, I get it. I get
Yeah.
it, man. It's the story of my life. People tell me, "Oh, like, where's the proof?" Right? So these are guys who've gone out and done things, and that these are a different network than the network that most people are used to. Because what are we generally exposed to? We are exposed to people who are good at branding and who have a package story that they sell well on the internet. right? Nothing wrong with it. I think it's a high art. I suck at it. I haven't figured out how to do that yet, right?
Right.
So I suck at it. So those guys get exposed, but that does not mean there is not gold elsewhere, right? Now, it's kind of like saying you see this girl and you tell the girl, you know what? I know Kim Kardashian. She's awesome because I've seen her on the web, but I don't know who you are, so I'm not going to date you. It's stupid. It's really stupid to do that, right?
Yeah.
So these are people who have spent 30 to 50 years polishing that craft.
Right.
And their focus has been polishing that craft rather than marketing and selling a particular solution. That does not make them superior. I'm not saying this is superior. I'm just saying this is the reason you may not have heard of them. Secondly, most of us are generally looking towards Asia for all our answers,
Right.
right? And Asian arts. And this is not the regular, what's the word I'm looking for? Uh, the regular people that come up when you're just looking at the Asian. So these,
Sure.
some of them have like at least two of them told me they didn't even want that picture on the web page. I
Right.
said, how am I going to tell people that this guy's a real dude?
Yeah, it
Well,
can sometimes be an uphill battle, and I get this as somebody who, I've spent the better part of a decade traveling to all sorts of strange and beautiful places, and what I've found, what was a revelation to me, is that you'll find a master living in a small town in Alabama. You'll find an absolute gem in a suburb of Toronto.
yeah,
And another thing that I like to say is that neither popularity nor obscurity guarantee quality,
no, they
right?
don't.
So just because you're popular and you have a lot of Instagram accounts doesn't mean you're good at what you do, doesn't mean you're bad at what you do either. And just
Yeah,
because you don't have even a social media presence, it doesn't mean that you're a gem by virtue of being obscure, just as it's no guarantee of quality. So
yeah,
there's a certain degree of trust. And I think for me personally, where this trust in your work really came down to was in our conversation, in understanding how much you've actually put into this research that now you're willing to share and connect these loose fabrics together. So who should be going to this thing? Because this is an actual event that people can, buy a ticket to, but you're being very selective.
yeah. Look, uh, it has to be a good match for both people coming in and us because we have a certain goal we want to accomplish, and we don't want people to, we want them to have a good time as well, right? So think about this. You're going to be working out for 40 hours over 3 days.
Okay, let me 40 hours. So you go to this event,
Yeah,
right?
3 days. You start at 7:30 in the morning, and you're working out till 10 p.m. Okay.
Damn.
So number one, you got to be able to handle time.
Yeah,
Number
that's a
two,
special student. Yeah.
number two, you want to be able to suspend your beliefs. You want to be able to suspend your my school has all the answers and say, okay, I know a lot of things. I understand you know a lot of things. Great, man. But just leave that behind and come and try this different food, try these different things,
Hmm.
and be open with your curiosity and be open to be amazed, right? And I don't guarantee you will be amazed because that's a very personal thing, right?
Hmm.
But the fact is that you will have this deep immersion that you might not get anywhere else. Now, look, what did the pandemic do? It further gave rise to two things. One is online training, which people were doing, which is great, right? But second, also the idea that these seminars are 1 to 2 hours,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, you're doing that for 2 hours, but then how much do you retain? But when you jump in and dive in like this on one subject over 30 to 40 hours, right? It changes things. And that's what we're hoping to do, that these connections start to form in your mind and you're able to go. And then you know what? You don't have to study all of it. Nobody can study all of it.
Right.
Uh, Paulo, you may say, you know what? I like this double machete shit. I'm going to go study Greenlight. I might be like, hey,
Yeah.
I like the whip. That's what I'm going to do. But hopefully it opens these doors to these right people for you to then go and do these things. Now we're also limiting it to 25 people, right?
Hmm.
The reason is that if you're working in pairs, it's roughly about 12 pairs. It's easy for the teacher to keep a track of, right? If you have 50 to 100 students, yes, I understand will be great, but at the same time, now the teacher cannot keep track of too many things. There's too much noise, and you'll only stick at a very surface level. So that's what we have found, that what works for us is between 20 and 25 people. We have these 10 or so instructors, and most of them also jump in and work out because, like it is quite common to see guys like Mark Denny jumping in and working out, guys like Martin Wheeler jumping in and working out, TJ Obi jumping in and working out, Ron Saturno jumping in and working out. So, people are able to leave their egos behind, whatnot, and nobody's taking pictures to show, oh yeah, he's training with me, or he's doing this, or he's doing that. All that's left behind. You just go in, you have fun, you learn, you walk away.
Come on, we can take pictures, no?
No, I'm telling people, no pictures, no videos, nothing. You can do it in breaks while you're training.
Okay. I got it. This is really, really focused. This is really, really interesting.
Yeah. So that's what I'm trying to do, because look, my time is short, and I think my time is short. So I'm trying to accomplish what I can do in my life and have some things to leave behind, so that people can then take it to the next step.
Let me ask you this question. You've gathered hundreds of hours of footage.
Yeah.
You've gathered and curated, manuscripts and scrolls and articles and magazines, and this is all stored somewhere. We've already talked about this. I know it's safe.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of a person might you consider sharing this with and continuing your work?
So
describe that person.
So we have started putting a structure in place for that, right? So the kind of people that we're looking for is guys who share that DNA. And what I mean by that DNA is they're driven by curiosity, right? And it doesn't become about self-promotion, but promoting these other teachers and their arts that are there, right? So one of the things that we were doing at the foundation, and we were recording things, one of the things we want to do is we want to give 50% or more of any proceeds that come to the teachers themselves, because we believe that the publishing paradigm should be that the artist should have that knowledge and the money. All right. Secondly, it's this weird third space. We have a lot of academics who like to analyze and read and write things, and then you have a lot of martial artists who just like to fight. But we are looking for this third person, right? That has that bent to do both, who's willing to pull out a blade and jump in, and yet at the same time willing to humble themselves and say, I don't know, and then seek out these experts in a very scientific manner, start to track down that information. So that's the kind of guy. And beyond that, right, the most important thing is they got to have the passion for this, because if you don't have the passion for this, you're not going to be up at 3 a.m. taking a call from the other end of the world. And one of my co-conspirators, as I like to call him, Michael, says he's like, I don't think I could put up with all the no's that you put up. But I'm like, it's part of that. It's part of that story. So I probably have to listen to 100 no's, or no's 100 times before some of these guys say yes.
In your collection, what's a little carrot you can dangle in front of everybody? Something that you can say you have access to that you think a lot of people might be like, whoa, he's got that? He's got that interview? He's got
Lots
that.
of stuff. Lots of stuff.
Oh, yeah?
Let me give you a sampling.
Okay, yes, please.
The Maori art of Rongomomo. Most people think of Maori arts, they only think about the teha, the stick. But there's an inner art called the Rangamomo, which was basically take the weapons away and then kill them with their own weapons. And this was taught by the last warrior priest of the Maoris. I have that entire piece. Second,
That's cool.
Second, the Italian agro-pastoral art of
the Italian agro-pastoral.
Yes.
Like farmer priests? Is that
No, these are farmers. These are farmers who used everyday implements to do killing and defending, right? And this has been secretive for hundreds and hundreds of years. And to my knowledge, there are only two people with films of this, my buddy Marco Quarta and me. Right? And Marco has been a mestre in the Italian tradition for a long, long time, and he's the one who opened the door. But we have this on film. So that's the second one. Third, James Keating. Uh, Lots, hundreds of hours of video of him doing the blade. Right.
Yeah.
That's the third. Fourth, I'll say things around the Indian art of Varma Kalai. Indian arts are a big mystery to most people, right?
Mhm.
One of the headmasters of the Indian school, basically showing all the aspects of how you make blades alive, how do you put life into it, how do you move with them, that sort of stuff.
And anything in the realm of Filipino martial arts?
I have the last interview with Johnny Cabalas, the son of Angel Cabalas. I have pl- hundreds of hours of films with Ron Saturno that's not up, with guys like Jaime Cabero, who was instructor number 4 with Angel Cabalas. I have films of Grandmaster Tenyo and Master Juan Elia that are not out in the public, and them doing their stuff. I have Mangromi Macapagal basically archiving the entire system of Kali Lestrisimo from the beginning to the end. Um, he also took us to Payate, looking at Payate Arnis. There are a few people who've done that. Tim Riviera, whose quote you put out, he studied Payate Arnis for a while,
Mhm.
a lot longer than me. It's arts of Tapado, which was shot in the village where Tapado came from. So yeah, I have a I have a long, long list.
That's really cool. What? Why you? Why have these people entrusted you with this footage, with this material?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I talk to them. I tell them what I'm doing, and I think many of them tested me many times over, right? And slowly over a period of time, I think when they began to see that some of their arts may actually disappear, their
Yeah.
children are not interested, or the grandchildren not interested,
Right.
but they have that passion inside of them, and passion recognizes passion, you know, and
Absolutely. And
and
truth recognizes truth, and authenticity is not something that you can hide. So I
I
could
think also one other piece is that maybe I don't make a living doing martial arts. Maybe that also helped them to
sure.
say that, okay, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't teach martial arts. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
But I think that was one of the factors that perhaps helped them say, okay, you know what, he's not going to sell this out or make it his
Right.
unique branding.
Yeah, I have a stack of hard drives that I'm looking at now of stuff that will never be released. I did similarly to what you did, but in the tactical community. So
Yes,
I mean, I have a commendation letter from the commander of the Formosa unit in
Poland.
Poland. But I think they all have this desire also to want to find a way, a path to preserve their legacy and for their stories to be told, even if they're not comfortable with it being told immediately.
Yes,
And in many ways, and this is sort of why I connect with you, is that you're a bit of a monument builder, right? Like you are building some form of permanence to things that would otherwise erode and blow as dust in the wind by curating, I think we've talked about this also, that you have or are establishing a board to manage this information, because man, that's a lot for one person to have,
not
and
just that. Yeah, not just that, right? What happens if I just die, number one, or two, I go crazy, right? And I
yeah,
start going on a power trip or whatever, right?
yeah,
Then, that's not the word and the promise that was given to these teachers. So this knowledge is far greater than me. I'm a nobody. I'm just my hope is that I'm a bridge between these two worlds,
right.
and my goal is to make it a short bridge. You know?
Yeah, I love this, and if we can stick with this bridge analogy, and I'm going to share the website again. I think in a profound way, what you're looking for in these 25 students are to be pillars or supporting structures of this bridge that you're trying to build. Like
Yes,
the person who joins here ought not to be joining purely for themselves. Is
I
that a
would
fair
hope so.
assessment?
I would hope so. And and they would provide tremendous value even if they bust my myths or the myths of my fellow mates and say, you know what, you're wrong here. Here's the proof for why you're wrong. Even that is a tremendous service, right?
Right.
Because it could save
Sure.
us years and years of work. So hopefully these students who come in, they come for two reasons. One is, have fun and explore new things, right?
Right.
And two, connect and help us build something towards a future that we say, you know what, let's not forget this part of our history, this part of our legacy. Let me give
Right.
you one example. Just go to the special sessions if you don't mind.
Special sessions. Yes.
Yeah, here, yeah. So
Okay.
there's a gentleman called Michael Belzer. People say, oh, we don't know who some of these guys are. Well, let me tell you a little bit about this man, right? He's the first guy who trained with Tatang. He's the man.
Wait, hold on. Wait, what do you mean? Say that again. He's the first guy to train with Tatang
Tat- yeah,
Illustrissimo?
Tatang Illustrissimo, first Westerner to train with Tatang Illustrissimo. He's the man who gave the name to the art, Kali Illustrissimo. Tatang was his tour guide and his bodyguard for the time he was in Philippines. That's number one. Number two, he studied with Don Draper himself. He went out and did stuff with Don Draper, studied and explored things. He's done his expeditions. Number three, Don Draper's unpublished book, The Theoretics of Hopology, with his collaborator, Dick Hayes, that nobody has again heard of, was entrusted to him. And he's basically, for the last 2 years, every Thursday, been teaching me and passing that down. So that's the quality of the people, You haven't heard of them because they choose to stay in the background. They're just busy doing the work. And to top it, he has a ninth degree in Danzan Ryu, right? Wally J's book on small circle jiu-jitsu. He's the guy who's getting thrown around by Wally J. He's an instructor in Sarada. He was studying with Guru Dance from the 1970s. That's the quality of the people, But these guys, now there's just one person that I described, right? But
Yeah.
they just like to do the work in the background because it gives them joy, it gives them happiness. And he's super generous. I mean, just imagine, he hasn't charged me a penny. He spent every Thursday morning passing this down meticulously. Right?
Michael Belzer.
Yes.
Interesting.
And that's just one person, right? So just to give you an idea of the kind of people.
Yeah, what's Michael Belzer do? He looks very interesting to me. This guy looks really interesting.
I'll let him speak for himself, but
Okay.
he has his business and I'm saying that because he's a private person. So
I
what he
understand.
wants to reveal, he'll reveal.
Sure.
Right? He has a business. He works in LA and he does martial arts all the time.
Very interesting. And again, folks who are listening right now, I hope we've
Professor TJ Obi, right? The first
where's
outsider.
that?
This guy here above Belzer. TJ Obi.
Yes, this guy.
Yeah.
Grima.
Yeah. So he's the first outsider to have become an instructor in Grima, right? And he studied with multiple lineages, living and studying in Colombia. He's a guy who in the early 1980s was rolling with Helio Gracie and was the translator for Helio Gracie when the first foreign students
Come
were
on, this
coming
guy
in.
looks like he's 20 years old. There's no way.
Yeah.
He's a doctor.
And he's a doctor, and he's walked through Africa, through war-torn regions in Africa, trying to find old art, especially like Angola capoeira. But that's the quality of the people,
This is very fascinating. For the folks who are listening right now, I hope we've presented a good case for at least a deeper exploration and a deeper look into what you do. And maybe this isn't for you, but maybe you know somebody who this might be the thing that they've been waiting on,
Yeah. And this is not a seminar circuit. I don't repeat these things. I don't go city to city. That's one of the questions I get. Oh, when are you doing this again?
Come on, why not? I honestly feel like it should be.
It should be, but you know what? It should be. Maybe it's for somebody else. I'm busy exploring these questions, and then I go into deep dives in certain areas, and then
Right.
disappear for a while, right? Because look, pulling events together, it's not easy, man. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, I don't like doing that stuff.
I don't like doing that. So, and especially, and if it destroys my passion and the fun for me, then there's
Yeah.
no use. But maybe somebody else can do it.
Hey, if anything, I mean, what I find about these podcasts and these broadcasts is it takes on a life of its own, and you never know who's watching. There might be a person out there who's like, I can be his organizer, I'll be his event planner, and I'll do it
Yeah,
out of the goodness of my own heart, and
or,
maybe
or make money doing it. I don't care.
right. Yeah,
So,
it's just so you can continue on this path. Like, yeah, this is super awesome, man, and it was a real pleasure to meet you. Like I said at the beginning of this podcast, I got a lot of people contacting me about, hey, I got this new knife, or I did this new thing, or I'm an instructor for this and this, and it's often a letdown. But this, when you first told me about it, it was really not only refreshing, but it was truly invigorating to know that something like this is going to happen. Somebody's going to benefit from this, and then everybody's going to benefit from it.
yeah.
Whether or not we find ourselves in that, tribal state where we feel like we're at odds with one another, I think it's going to benefit everybody. I do hope that it's documented. Whether or not you make that available now, later, never, but
It will
okay.
be. It will be documented, and
Okay.
at some point when the structure is right, it will be released to universities and museums, and hopefully to the wider public as well.
Man, I feel like all the stuff that you have, your articles, your footage, your interviews, your world travel, it's like a Netflix special waiting to happen. This dude is like, you're like the Indiana Jones of combat arts.
Oh my God.
That's pretty damn cool.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? What I would love to do is just have a few more people come in and take this further than I have. And my life has reached a stage where I can't do some of the things that I could do maybe 10 years ago. I can't do that anymore.
Hold on a second. I'm not sure if your audio is degrading or if my ability to hear it.
No, I said, I hope it gets some other people to be inspired by this and want to come and do it. And I'm happy to show them how to do it, because I am no longer going to be able to do some of the things I was able to do 10 years ago, right? And I've come to a stage where I need to start passing things on to the next group of people who want to explore it. I'm not retiring, I'm not dying.
Yeah.
The point is that, at different stages, you do different things. And you need people who are crazy enough and
Mahipal, it sounds like your mic is compromised. But if I'm hearing you correctly, what I'm gathering is that you want to inspire somebody to pick up where you left off. Now I can't hear you at all, so that's no good. Live.
Okay, so
There we go. Perfect audio.
So what I'm saying is that I'm hoping I've reached a stage in my life where I don't have the luxury of doing some of the things I did 10 years ago. I can't just jump in and go into the forests and pull out blades and not worry about things. And I can't do that anymore, but I'm still going to do it in a systematic way. But hopefully some others come in and say, hey, I want to do this. How do I do this? I'm
Right.
more than delighted to work with them and show them how to do it and take it forward. There are some guys who, like Dean, has been wanting to learn the Latin art. So I and a few others are putting a few things together where they start looking at some of the Latin arts. Similarly, we hopefully will start doing some of these things for things around the European arts. I mean, and there are guys who've been doing this way longer than I have, and they've been super kind and super generous. So hopefully that is the starting point for the next generation to go even further and deeper, right? And it's all about refinement. It's all about following the trail of evidence, both in written records, but more importantly, in an embodied knowledge, meaning being able to pull it off. Right?
Man, I love it.
So that's the hope.
I love it. I wish you all the best of luck in finding what you're looking for. I hope that person's listening right now. So as far as this event goes, it sounds expensive. It sounds prestigious. It's got to be. I mean, this is not, you pay $99 at the door, or early bird special $85. So
no. So there's a very specific process that we follow. Go through the fill in the forms. You'll sign an NDA. We'll have a short interview, make sure it's a good match for each other.
Yeah.
Then we tell you the price. So just fair disclosure, right? We don't announce our price for a very specific reason.
Yeah.
I can't get into that. But the thing is, I'm just trying to cover the cost of what happens. And so far, I have not done it. I've
Yeah.
failed covering the cost, and that's still okay. We are still doing it. But yes, it's not going to be a $99 at the door.
You know what you should do? And maybe you do it, maybe you don't. But even the people who can't afford to be there, I'm sure would love to be a patron or a donor. And I would give up some of my money for just to ensure this thing happens. Maybe there's a way for people to pool their money and provide a scholarship for somebody who deserves to be there but can't be there. Maybe there's a way that people can go through the interview process, get approved, and then maybe fundraise to be able to go there, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm open to all those ideas. And again, like I said, this is purely done for the love of the arts.
Yeah.
If this was a moneymaker, first of all, this format wouldn't work. Right?
No, you're throwing money away by not having merch tables and sponsors and all this package A and package B. So clearly this isn't to make money, but obviously you need to cover costs, and this needs to go.
Hopefully, I'm hoping that this time or next time I learn how to break even, because that's not sustainable, not breaking even.
Yeah. And maybe some people know people who are experts at fundraising and philanthropists.
So I did go down that path a little bit with grants, but that's such a long process.
It is, yeah.
It could take years before a event is approved, and then also what happens with it is that you have to sell a particular point of view, and then you can't deviate from it. And I think when you do that, I think truth is sacrifice. So
it's compromise at the very least. Yeah, for sure. I agree.
So I'm looking for all ways, and there are guys way smarter than me, way better at doing this stuff than I am. So reach out to me and tell me, hey,
reach out to this man. If there's any way that you can support this, whether it's a donation, maybe you have a skill set, maybe you have a connection, maybe you have a friend who should hear about it. You should definitely dig into this, because
this is the first time I've actually come out and started talking to people. I've been doing all this work just silently, and I kind of realized that I'm doing the same mistake that I'm telling the people that I convinced not to do. That I said, oh shit, correct that. So go out and talk to people.
Yeah.
Makes me uncomfortable, to tell you the truth, but it's part of it.
Good. Growth is in discomfort, my friend. And I've spent, the better half of my career doing this, convincing other people to do the same. People who lived extraordinary lives and are vessels for important wisdom and information, to finally be uncomfortable and put yourself out there, because the information, the wisdom deserves it, and it lives and it's bigger than the individual.
Yeah, and I think and also I think if I can give one piece of advice, go to places that are diametrically opposed to everything that you've done.
Yes, sir.
That is what is going to open your minds, and the European arts are that for me. So it's that stage of my life where I'm like, okay, this is where now I go and humble myself. Where all my past stuff doesn't matter. Start with my white belt and start moving on, so to speak.
I love it. People often talk about that white belt mentality, and they want to be the player coach, the teacher student. But in my observation, there are actually very few who are demonstrative and earn that title, and so I consider you one of those people in the Filipino martial arts. For what it's worth, I really appreciate what you're doing. I hope that people appreciate what you're doing. Take the time, watch the video again, contact Mahipal if you have something to offer that can contribute. Maybe you're not a pillar on this bridge that he's trying to build, but maybe you're a little swipe of mortar. Maybe you're one brick on the pillar.
Or somebody who's a hidden treasure who hasn't decided to come out, and then
there you go.
Unleash this bulldog on them.
Absolutely. And I think you could do a good job, right? Like if you guys know somebody who's like, there's no way I'm going to be public, just be like, you know what? I need you to talk to this Mahipal guy just for a minute. And then we do this together.
Yeah,
We can
and
contribute
this
in
is a
some way to
project
your
we
work.
do together. So there's more than enough room for a lot of people on this, man. So this is, and again, I cannot emphasize this enough. Even though I am right now the face of it and in front, this is not about me. All those people you see there, it's about them. They've dedicated their lives to the Spanish blade craft, and they've honed in this very particular expression. So all I'm doing right now is being a mouthpiece to say, hey guys, this is the experiment. Come, let's look at that comprehensive piece. And that's where it is.
I love it. Listen, Mahipal, thank you so much for your time.
Hey, thanks, man.
Thank you for doing this. I hope we can talk again. Maybe we can talk a little bit more in detail about specific regions of the world. I know,
Sure.
you know, my audience really loves, you know, talking about this whole Spanish Filipino thing.
Yeah,
but
one of the
if we've
things
learned anything,
I
it's
think having
broader.
two pieces we can talk about later sometime if you guys are up for it. One is the influence on fencing and its influence on Jeet Kune Do, right? Because FMA, a lot of the guys are, you know,
Mhm.
there's a crossover with that. And then there's this interesting organization called the SCA. These guys put on armor and fight full contact with weapons. So there's a sense of reality that comes in, which is interesting, but it's a very different set. But I'm open to questions, and if I know the answer, I'll say, hey, this is what I think. I usually say
Awesome.
this is what I think, but if I don't know, then you started me off on yet another quest.
That's awesome. And you know what? If you're a practitioner of maybe a lesser known Filipino martial arts, would you be open to people contacting you and saying, "Hey, have you got it?
Absolutely, man.
Have you got anything on this?"
Yeah, please,
Okay.
please do.
Well, welcome to the big bad world of social media, and you know it's a package deal. You know, there's pros and cons to it.
Yeah, yeah.
So-
I'm a little scared to tell you the truth, but here we are.
Welcome. No, it's for the greater good, and any temporary discomfort now, you know, hopefully yields, you know, positive outcomes in the future. So thank you, my
Thanks,
pal.
man. We'll
I
talk
appreciate you, brother. Take care. Woo! All right. Well, that was a lot. Yeah. So like I said at some point in the interview, I really believe in this project for one reason or another, and I've made a career out of being able to filter you know, extraordinary instructors, extraordinary opportunities, even through this artificial filter of a screen. I've never met the man in person, but I've sort of built a body of work that I can personally trust and say, I think that guy's doing good things. I think that's worth exploring. Let's go put some effort towards doing that. So I hope that the case has been proven for that. I really appreciate your time. Sorry, I couldn't get to some of the comments. You know, I'm reading them all, but there was just kind of no time. So I really appreciate you guys. And like I said, you know, he's thrown the pebble into the still waters, right? We are the ripple effects of that now. So let's see how far we can take this. Tell people about this event. Go visit the website. Contact Mahipal. Is an extraordinary opportunity to be able to potentially access information that was up until recently a closed gate, right? So take that opportunity. Let's do this together. What's that saying? A rising tide raises all ships. So let's get to work. I appreciate your time, guys. Thank you very much.